Well, I guess we can officially get started, right? My clock says 2:02. I mean, we can still keep chatting this way too, but the whole idea behind the Q&A is for, thank you, Matt, for announcing it in class too, is for any questions that you have, about the yoga. This is kind of a free time to bring it up and just, we have a conversation about it, which is sort of fun. So anybody would like to start?
Sure. Well, I mean, opening remarks, I mean, I just love being part of you guys or part of this group. And when I explain to people that, yeah, I'm part of a yoga community in California, they kind of look at me a little silly. But, I've practiced in a lot of studios and a lot of schools, and just that, you guys' attention to detail and, saying the dialogue, saying the benefits of the postures, and just the dedication and intensity that you guys teach with is just, it's overwhelming. I just so appreciate it. So thank you, first of all.
I have to second what Tom said. I too have traveled, and so I've gone to a number of other studios only in this country. And although it's great to go to other studios because you always hear something different and you just see how studios are set up, you guys do a job that is not seen elsewhere in the States. I've been in Texas, I've been in DC, I mean, people in New York, people who've owned studios for 20 years. And, it's just, you guys just do something that is just really amazing. And also the integrity with which you welcome everybody. And, quite frankly, even the diversity in your studios of the people who you have teaching and the people you have attending. I mean, I'm in a pose almost every class, and I think about what happened when I was in a studio in DC, and this teacher just was like kicking my legs because she forgot my name and she thought she had the right name, and then she's like, "Your legs aren't together." I'm like going, I mean, it's been over 10 years. I've never forgotten that, and that's not a good memory. I just really kind of, it's a low bar, but it is a bar. But you guys are so much better just in how you even encourage people. I mean, I was really taken how you encourage people to, keep the nose over your mask. It just with like such kind but focus. It's, you may not think it's a big deal, but it really is.
Thank you.
Thank you both, Thomas and Lenore. I know, it's a great compliment. And I know, speaking for Matt and Sarah, that's important for us to hear, because we do work really hard. And quite honestly, it isn't hard because we believe in the yoga so much, and because, we believe in it and making sure that it's delivered the right way. For you to say that, both of you, all of you feeling that way, means that we're doing something that's of service in the right way. So, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. We love having you, of course. Lenora, you made me think of something when you said it was a low bar. When I started teaching, I taught at a studio where a student came up to me after class and said, "You're a really good teacher." And I probably wasn't. I was just like right at the beginning. And she said, "Oh yes," she said, "you're really good. You don't crack your knuckles and you don't put your hands on your lower back and groan." And I should think not. It's like,
yeah, that's funny.
But it's a low bar, Sarah.
Yeah. I remember a teacher I had in the early days too, Sarah. She would teach, bless her heart. She would teach looking out the window, looking at her nails, seeing how actually saying the dialogue. I know, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't.
Arms over your head sideways.
Yeah. What not to do, right, Sarah? These are what not to do.
I guess one more thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Daisy.
Anyway, sorry. Who's Matt? You want to go? Go ahead. Anyway, okay. my name Daisy, and I become a teacher in 2016. And I learned to come visit Michele and Matt and Sarah once in a while because I live near San Francisco. So it's about 45 minutes to San Jose. But I still try to visit as many times as I can. And I also travel a little bit, teach in different countries. And this is Michele's studio is amazing. And the teachers, the quality is just amazing. And not only sing the dialogue, you also connect with the student. You understand each dialogue, each word, there's meaning there. It's not just words. No, I know it's meditation, the same word, but more than that, really deep. And I'm really thankful that this community, and I wish I can teach in your studio one of these days, because it's just really just, if you haven't visited, you have to visit. That's my comment. And thank you again very much.
Thank you, Daisy. You keep going too, right? We need good teachers. We need good quality teachers. We need to keep bringing this yoga, out there. Yeah, I mean, and you have to really care, I mean, thank you for saying that, but, genuinely, Matt, Sarah, and myself, we care about you guys. We have an interest in your best interests.
Amazing, you guys,
yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, well, it's reciprocated. I think when we do that, we're getting back,
Oh, yeah.
So, Daisy touched on something about, the meaning of the words. So, in the dialogue, there are a lot of relatively simple words, suck your stomach in, some, little simple phrases. And sometimes it can be a little deceptive, but really there is a great deal of layers upon layers of understanding underneath those very simple words. And it's very normal and very natural to just progressively understand them. You start as a beginner, somebody says, suck your stomach in, you pull something in and something happens and you declare it a success, and it is a success. So the question I have really today, throw it out there, is there a posture or something we say that you struggle to understand, or you think you've got to a roadblock in your understanding, or you think you've had a breakthrough in understanding and want to ask about it?
Well, yeah, Matt, speaking of sucking your stomach in, I've just noticed in the last week, I start off class with a very tight lower back and glutes. Yeah. And so, standing head to knee and even several leg stretching at the beginning of class, I'm just like, oh, I mean, they're really just like, they're really hard for me. I mean,
yeah.
But I've noticed in pranayama, just the sucking of my stomach in and then lifting my body, that is giving me a nice lower back stretch. And yes. I'm like, it finally connected.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yes.
The transverse abdominis, which is if you're a weightlifter, you wear a big belt around here. That's the transverse abdominis. It's a muscle that basically goes in and out. It's not the sit-up muscle. It's not the crunch muscle. That muscle, which is the primary one that you suck in when we say suck your stomach in, that is its number one job is to support your lower back. And so a lot of modern adults have poorly developed muscle there, quite naturally, because we spend a lot of time sitting down, especially prevalent in truckers and people who drive for a living, because they're literally collapsed in that part of the abdomen for 8, 10, 12 hours of a day, just sitting in driving. And so so it starts in if you can lengthen the torso and pull the abdomen in, that's such, if we could to people to help them have a healthier life, that would be one of the things on the short list. It looks like our internet connection is a little bit low.
Yeah, it's just
so hopefully
goes in and out a little bit, Matt.
Yeah, but yes, no, I think you're absolutely right, Tom. It's just learning. Just do it as often as you can.
Isn't that nice when that feeling comes, Tom, that you got something and something new happens? It's like, oh.
Yeah, no, it's a totally new thing, because it's just been so frustrating. And And, you know, and then it gets to standing head to knee, and I'm like, you know, I used to be able to do that a lot easier because I just wasn't as tight. But I'm hopeful.
You know, if I could add to that, I also think too, and this is relevant for frequency, I think it also is as a result of your commitment to your practice, Thomas, because it's probably the sequence, and you've been doing it over and over again, that finally in pranayama one day, you've been able to kind of get it up, you know, traction your spine a little bit more, right? And feel that space, right? So you've earned it, you know, that's why we say trust the process, because it may not happen right away. And yeah, there's an aha moment, but it was through that traveling, through doing the postures, right? That one day, maybe you've been trying it and it hasn't like released, and all of a sudden now, right? It's, you know.
And if you put the two things together, the trying, and then the aha moment, you take the actions and the results take care of themselves. The results deliver themselves to you as a result of that constant repetition. The mind starts to understand, the body understands, and then you're there.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. There's an interesting thing about the transverse abdominis as well, that muscle group that you're working on, is that it works to support your spine, whether you're somebody who naturally has an overbend of your lumbar spine, like it overly bends forward, or somebody who has a very underbent lumbar, you know, because the lumbar is meant to bend forward. But for some people it bends too much, for some people it bends too little. But the interesting thing about that particular muscle, the way it works, is that it's simply getting it stronger will improve both sides of the spine issue. So if you're somebody super flexible, prone to overbending backwards in the lumbar, learning to suck your abdomen in will help. If you're somebody who doesn't bend enough backwards, you have a stiff lower back, same thing. So it's one of the beautiful things about Bikram Yoga that, you know, our instruction starts with these very simple instructions, but they literally are just this deep subject matter that you can just keep peeling away the layers of to understand.
So since we're on that part of the body, so I think for you know, everyone who's been teaching, this will be no surprise, but one of the challenges that I've been having is in the head to knee with stretching, how to loosen my lower back at the end. So I'm wondering, and I know Matt and Sarah, you guys have been very diligent in trying to coach me through it, but I still feel like it's kind of like not happening. So I'm wondering if you have any tips to kind of help me to kind of break through.
The leg, so abdomen, certainly, that's a very important piece of the engagement, but also you're learning to connect with your legs. So with the straight leg, that should feel like it's seated deep into the hip, you know, so as you learn to push the heel away from you, so you're learning to straighten your leg from deep down in the hip. So the leg lengthens, but the hip socket joint, the femur joint, gets deeply located, and that is connected muscularly to your abdomen. So you want to try and connect those two actions. So that's partly why we start with the beginner, saying to the beginner, you can bend the knee, the forehead must touch the knee. So you've got the contact on the forehead and the knee, so you can work on both actions at the same time. The abdomen.
Stretching.
You said.
This is at the very end.
Oh, you mean the stretching? I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you want to answer that?
Well, starting you started off with for the legs. So the knees locked is really important. So the legs always the foundation. It's, you know, I will say, Neil, that this is people's bodies go different ways naturally. So for me, that posture, obviously I improve it all the time, but my body naturally went that way. Whereas to do rabbit or standing separate head to knee for years, that was my equivalent of this posture for you. This is like, I didn't know even what to do with myself. So some of it is connecting the mind with the body to know what to do. But if you think, and one of the things I think that even I wasn't really thinking about, even though I could do the posture, that you're stretching the spine. So the goal of this posture, everything is like a framework for stretching the spine, and it's stretching from the coccyx to the neck. So when we say come down, bend the body down from the lower spine towards the floor, the knees are locked, and then you're bending from the coccyx. And if you think like you're trying to make yourself into the shape of a stapler. So things to do, the knees locked, everything is actually, the dialogue's incredibly good. And it's just, in some postures, it takes a while, years and years maybe to get it. The knees are locked. Make sure your knees are locked. And bend the body down from the lower spine, grab the heels, and then pull. Now you can, at this point, go very slow as you come down. There is a tendency, so there's a tendency to, you get about halfway down, and then maybe you think you should be quicker, you should be keeping up with the teacher, maybe you think you've taken too much time, maybe it's just too much effort. But you have to, at that point, when you're about halfway down, you have to have the courage of your convictions and go all the way down the same way. So from the lower spine towards the floor, goal to stretch the spine, then you grab the heels. Now the pulling is then an access to stretching the spine more. But that it's hard to say this, you have to keep the knees locked and try to relax the hips muscles a little bit. So the front of the thighs are contracted, the stomach's contracted, but you have to get a sense of letting go at the same time so that then the spine stretches. But I will say that it might be that Matt or Michele have more access, maybe Matt has more access to what to do when it doesn't happen. Because,
Can I say one thing, Neil? You're talking about the final phase stretching, yes? Yes, that's
separate leg stretching.
Yeah, right before we do spine twisting, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was.
See you.
Oh, excuse me.
But many of the same things apply. Yeah.
But you still have to look like a stapler. Sorry, I thought you were doing that standing separate leg stretching posture. Yes. Oh, I get you. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to say, exactly what Matt and Sarah, of course, are saying. And that's beautiful information. I hope that you get that. But here's, Neil, I haven't seen your practice in a while. But one thing that Sarah was emphasizing, your legs have to be locked.
Yes.
If they're not locked, then that's all you're thinking about, Neil.
I think my legs are locked.
Well,
I'll go back to that. Thank you, Michele. Thank you for clarifying what we were actually talking about. I apologize. I thought you said separate leg stretching, but actually all those postures, they're all very similar. So my legs, some of these guys, Michele and Matt have both seen me practice this. My legs are not locked usually. They look like they're locked, but there's always more. So if you think your legs are locked, you have to keep going. And the more locked they are, the easier it comes. So the access to that literally is that walking the hips back until they're locked. Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. You can bend the knees a little bit, and bring the body down to really feel, and then walk the hips back, 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 back. So what Michele said, the legs locked. And I'll even go so far to say, and I've heard Bikram say this, which is why I've started saying this, there's no point pulling on bent legs. It is a waste of your time.
And that's what I want to emphasize, Neil, because if you're saying your lower back hurts, your knees aren't locked.
No, it's not hurting. It's just that the feedback that I've been getting. So most of the classes are with Matt and Sarah. The feedback I've been getting is that I'm kind of not. When I'm coming down, I'm kind of not doing it correctly because my back is tense.
Yes.
And I'm not kind of folding down properly. I feel like my knees are locked and my heels are off the floor, and I'm pulling my toes, and I'm trying to, go forward rather than just pull the toes back. But somehow I think my back is still too tense.
Yeah, you're bracing in the back. So part of that journey with Paschimottanasana is to learn that your thighs, and that's why the knees need to be locked, that your thighs, the thighs are your feet in that posture. So your thighs are pushing down into the floor. You're literally pushing forward from your thighs. And so as you go deeper into the posture, your connection of your thighs to the floor should get deeper and stronger and more complete and more comprehensive, because that is the foundation, that is the leverage point that the body is using. And what often happens is in Bikram Yoga, we ask students to pull their toes back in that posture to learn how to lock the knees to create the foundation for the posture. But there comes a point where it's less about the pulling than it is about using the foundation you've created to stretch forward from that lower spine. And so think about more like you're letting your body come forward. So your lower back should be relaxed. It's just like if I sit to the side and this is me sitting up straight and I slump. So now I'm slumped forward, my lower back just popped backwards. But now what do I do to sit up straight? I push my sit bones and my thighs down into the chair and I lift my chest up, and my spine just got straighter and longer. And I just did it. It's just something we all know naturally how to do that. And that action is part of what you're doing in Paschimottanasana. You're sitting down into the floor and lifting the chest up. I mean, instead of it going straight up, you're of course leaning forward as you go. So your chest comes forward, and the arms are there once you get beyond the basics of locking the knees, the arms are there as part of helping you guide the extension forward. So there should be no tension in the lower back at all.
There's also the thing which you often teach, which is that it's almost like when I look at you, Neil, and I don't know what you're feeling in your body, but lots of people do this. They kind of pull on the toes and resist against the toes to pull the toes back. Whereas actually the toes are more like a point of stability once you've got the knees locked, to pull the body forward. So you're not pulling the toes back towards you, you're pulling your body forward to use the toes, using those as an anchor point. And then when you do that, you can start to relax the back more. But if I'm pulling on the toes, even I would do this, and the posture comes quite easy to me. If I'm pulling on the toes, that's going to make a lot of tightness and resistance. So it's more like I'm using the toes as leverage to pull my body forward.
So sometimes sometimes we might teach it in like a workshop or something. We might teach a variation just for the purpose of getting to access to this point, which would be, instead of holding your feet, simply extend your arms by the sides of your feet and simply just keep reaching forward, and discover that connection of your upper thighs and your sit bones sinking down into the floor and being the foundation that you're stretching out of. But I would say for you, just relax the pull on the toes, let your body slump, then lift your chest up, get that sense that you've really extended, you're really sitting into the floor, you're really sitting up straight, and simply lean forward, maintaining that length, and start to explore that. So there's no point at which the spine bends backwards, because once what happens is people bend backwards and then they lock it in place and then they're stuck.
And remember that when we say lower spine towards the floor, it's literally the lowest part of the spine. It's not the lumbar spine, it's coccyx to the neck. So that's the part that's sort of tight and doing the work. And think about it. I mean, I'm gonna turn my not listening and making a mistake into an advantage. That the same principle is happening in all the three postures: Padahastasana, standing separate leg stretching, and Paschimottanasana. So the one that you are most successful at, in my opinion, is Padahastasana. What do you do in Padahastasana that you could think about when you hear the words for the other two that you could do in them? Because that's helping. You've got the body and the legs, it helps you get that leverage. But think about how that leverage works and apply it when you come into the others.
And in many respects, this connects back to what Thomas was saying, that there are some underlying basics to how the body moves that show up in many of the different postures. And so thighs pushing, going backwards, rather, if you're standing up straight, thighs going backwards, or in the case of Paschimottanasana, down towards the floor, the abdomen going back, chest lifting, These are sort of foundational pieces of how to access the movement of the body. And we just do them in a lot of different postures as we learn how to navigate that territory. But they do, those themes come up again and again and again, even if they're not explicitly called out in how we're instructing the posture. It's more that you kind of discover it as you explore the posture.
I'll share something that happened to me in Paschimottanasana, which was that when I was in teacher training, my body could do it. And this is what I actually see in you. I think your body could do it. I don't think there's anything in the way, but I didn't do it. And Bikram shouted at me and shouted at me and shouted at me. And all he did was shout pull, which is not necessarily a very technical instruction, but he said it about 40 times. And at some point my mind let go, my body came down, my head touched my feet, and I never forgot it because the feeling came. So in a sense, you have to just keep doing the words until the body lets go, until it bypasses any thoughts you're having about what should be happening once you've got in the right place. Because I think you could do it. I think some neural connection is getting in the way.
Yeah, with to answer your question, in Padahastasana, I'm pulling on my heels, I'm sucking in my stomach, I'm putting my stomach on my upper thighs, looking down towards my ankles, and kind of putting my weight so I'm a little bit forward. Those are the things that I'm thinking about when I do that.
Bikram will tell you that the most important stretch to learn how to do is the 360-degree stretch. So you have hands to feet, right, in half moon, right? You have separate leg stretching, and then you have the final stretching. So I'm just reiterating what Matt and Sarah are saying. You just have your body positioned different with gravity. Yes. So there are some of the same principles to think about how you can carry one to the other. I think even you just said it, Neil. You just want to make sure that you never break form, especially in stretching. When we ask you to walk your hips back like 10, 15, 20, 25 times, we tend to start, when we move back, we slouch. That's why chin up, chest up. Then you got to go back to that again, right? And don't break the form, lock the legs, then only pull forward and keep the form. And it's going to be harder because, you know, you're not vertical, so you don't have gravity on your side as much, right? You're horizontal, and don't break your form, right? Don't slouch your shoulders. Come up a little bit if you are, and then just go nice and slow. Contract your thighs, right? Just like Matt and Sarah are saying, I'm just reiterating, right? That there are principles that you'll find them. They'll come to you. You don't even have to think about it. It's just the repetition, and then they'll come. But don't break your form. Don't break the form ever.
Yep. So I'm going to go out on a limb. I know that Matt and Michele don't teach it this way, but I think there's some advantage in setting up in the beginning, bringing the body down right away for some people, and bending the knees a little bit and walking the hips back. And once you've got that, then you lift the chest up. The chin's still forward, like Michele says, but to bring the body down and walk the hips back.
Yeah, Bikram
teaches it that way. Yes.
Yeah.
If you need it, I actually personally like it myself. But if you need it to get the feeling of getting the body down first, then you get where the hips are. And then before you start, you come up again. And then you're ready to come down again and forward. Sometimes for you, I think, because you brace your back, you're almost like, you're staying there like I have to stay up, but nothing is allowing to come down. So it can be helpful for some people. For some people, it's useless. For some people, it's really helpful.
Okay, thanks.
Not slumping, not slouching, everything's stretched, but just bring it down and get the hips back, because you get the feeling stapling, making the hips like the stapler. Yeah. Yeah,
that's the key thing. I don't want to go to the other extreme and slouch.
Exactly. Don't worry about it though. You have to make a mess if you need to. When you're changing something, you have to make a mess to start with. Don't worry, Neil, I'll tell you if it's wrong. You know this.
Yeah, this is the get dirty and then clean up philosophy.
Exactly. Yes. Both work. Be very precise works. Get dirty and then clean up works as well. You have to do both sometimes, you know. Yeah.
So
on the standing separate leg stretching posture, Michele, Matt, and Sarah, I think Michele, you corrected me today because my feet are too much inward facing, is what I understand. So how much should they be inward facing? When you say pigeon-toed, how much should they be? Because it did help me today. I've not been able to stretch down much, but today it was a little bit more. So I just wanted to get that.
Well, personally, I think your practice is changing, Ash. So I don't think it's just that posture. Quite honestly, even your standing bow, I'm noticing is different. Even your balancing stick today is different.
Elbows locked, wonderful. You're doing it now. That's excellent.
Yeah. So just like we were saying, right, with Thomas, right? It's like the whole thing is done in sequential order, right? And then you come back the next day and do it, and then you have these kind of aha moments or these little breaks, right? And they're a big deal. So, you know, there's this talk that Bikram, when he said slightly pigeon-toed, you know, sometimes I think we hear the word pigeon-toed and all of a sudden we want to bring the toes in, right? Really what he meant is that you don't want to be this way, right? You want your toes to be kind of in slightly. That's yeah. And I find too, I see people that start this way. There's a lot of students, including myself, days of old, right? They're too much this way. And then, you know, you've noticed that they're compensating somewhere, right? So the feet have to be proper, and use your feet, right? Put some weight on the inside of the feet and the outside of the feet, right? And tighten the thighs and pull straight down, right? So that's all you did. I think you were doing it too much this way. You don't want to be out, right? You want to be just slightly in and use your legs, right? Use your feet. Bring the weight a little bit more forward. So I constantly am using my feet. I mean, awkward posture is getting you ready, right? Too. You're doing all your footwork, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I have a question about half locust. So each leg going up independently, I am able to get my shoulders to the floor. That happened in January with the first 60 days. So yay for that. But when it comes to doing both legs together, yes, I know the legs aren't together. I'm working on it. They're much more together than they ever were. I referenced that earlier in my trip to DC where the lady kicked my legs. But what happens with my arms is that I can get my shoulders down as we're preparing, and my pinkies are touching, but they're not parallel. Like when I play volleyball, they're more like this. But what happens is I think they're straight. My elbows do hyperextend and over rotate. I know that. But when I start to try to push my shoulders forward, I find the bicep engages so much so that I literally am like hovering over the floor on my biceps. My hands are down, but I can't seem to push forward to roll my shoulders forward. So I'm ending up with a crick in my neck, especially when we put our heads to our right ear on the ground. I feel it when I do that. And so if I try to just lift my legs, that's just not it. I don't seem to have my weight in the right spot. So lifting the legs is nearly impossible. And then when I do get it, I don't know that I'm lifting from, well, I'm certainly not lifting from the upper part of the back. So any insights on that? I just know that when I can't be like this. So I'm usually a little bit like this, but then rolling forward, I just get a lot of this on the floor.
With the arms in locust, you want to be, it's not seeking the action of putting your shoulders down to the floor. That's not an action you should be chasing. It's more like that's a result of a number of other actions. And so one of the actions that's very important here is that you have to think, in all of these postures, and it's more obvious in a standing posture. The question is, what's the foundation of the posture? What's the connection to the ground? And so in locust, your arms are your foundation. So you are sort of quote unquote standing in your arms. Your arms are your feet, effectively. And so in locust, your arms should be very extended and very muscular. So, you know, us to separate the fingers and grab the floor fingers. So the arm, the whole of the arm is not just strong so it doesn't bend, and that would include hyperextending, you know, bending the wrong way as well as bending forward, but also extending. And as your shoulder extends downwards towards your feet, as you extend your fingertips towards your feet, what you'll find is your spine starts to extend. And so we then ask you to straighten your leg and lock your knee of the leg you're about to lift. So now you've got an extension anchored at the shoulders, all the way down to your fingertips and all the way down to your toes. And so you're creating a line of strength that hinges around the shoulder girdle that allows you to access an extension of the spine, but the arms are the foundation. So I would say, think more about extending your arms and sort of muscularizing your arms as you grab the floor with your tips of your fingers. And that will cause the shoulders to come closer to the floor. Whether they get to the floor or not on any given day, you have to explore, but then think more about that extension of the leg. And it begins deep in the hips. So you start to, so when we do one leg at a time, it's really focusing on getting access to the lower spine through the legs until you've kind of got it in both legs. So then we put the two legs together and you're working on eventually being able to extend all the way up to the neck or all the way up to the shoulder, to the mid-thoracic. So where the shoulder, where the scapula is joining the ribcage. And most people don't have that level of extension, you know, connecting the dots to get there to begin with. It takes time and practice to be able to connect the dots. But that's why we say you have, you know, sometimes you hear us say you have the power within you, but you don't know it yet. It's not a strength issue, because sometimes you'll have a beginner and they'll come in and they'll go, woof. And you were like, wow, they might be hopeless at everything else. And this one posture, they just nailed it. And it's just because something neurologically, the connection to that particular bit of the body, that they got every piece of the vertebra to engage in a sequence, go bang, 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 and then woof, and then they're right up. But we all have that strength within us. We just don't quite know how to ask the body to do it. And so it begins with a foundation of extending the arms, and it begins through the legs by learning to extend the legs. Does that make sense?
I tell you what helped me, Lenora, with it. I 110% agree that that's the result, putting the shoulders down. It's not the action. What helped me with everything Matt said was something which Emmy Cleave said, is your leg starts in your armpits.
Yeah.
So if you stretch your legs back from the armpits to the ball of the foot, you'll feel that the arms engage straight, and you keep doing that. It has all kinds of great effects. The shoulders get closer, not necessarily on the floor. We're not, like Matt said, we're not chasing it. The shoulders get closer. The whole side of the body, you're never going to hear, this is amazing to me, you're never going to hear stay on your left side, stay on your right side again, because using both arms, even when you're using one leg, armpits, the ball of the foot, is really a game changer in the whole posture to me. So the leg starts at the armpit and it goes through the ball of the foot. You start to really understand the mechanics of the posture and feel it in the body.
Yeah, when I do it on each separate leg, I have much greater connection with all of that. I may not have total success, but like intellectually, I kind of understand all of that. When I have to use both arms and lift both legs, I seem to, I guess, forget that my leg starts under my,
I know.
because I'm like kind of going, how do I even move?
Standing bow, and I was thinking, like, this isn't like normal. I just forgotten something that I tell you guys that I normally doing it. It happens, you know. But that's the fact you're doing it on the one leg. You just remind yourself again and go slow. You know all.
No.
And like you said this morning, continuous, not like but continuous.
Matt and Sarah, you guys are cutting in and out a little bit.
Oh.
You know, Lenora, oh my gosh, you guys, I can't tell you how many years it took me to get my shoulders down. Years and years and years. One of the things that to emphasize, especially what Matt was saying, is you go back to the basics. Your arms have to be super active. They have to be, remember there's a part of the dialogue too where grab the floor with your fingertips. I mean, grab the floor, right? Stretch your arms down. Make sure that your arms are straight. You have to activate those arms. And one day the shoulders will come down, right? Yeah, don't think it has to be, but you do have to activate those arms, right? Remember, this is spinal strengthening. You got to really use that strength and grab the floor. Then eventually, I'll never forget when my shoulders went down. It was like huge for me, you know, and it's hard to see. We can see it easier on the podium too, but yeah, you have to activate your strength. Stretch your leg back and up. You make sure your arms are activated. No bend in the elbows. Use your fingertips. Grab the floor, right? Think that you're driving the weight forward. Lift the leg up. And you should feel it all in your arms. Remember, your elbows are supposed to hurt in that posture.
I'm finding an awful lot in Atlanta, all across 3 studios, when I have people set up for this posture, instead of them getting their arms all the way underneath, it's like they're right next to their bodies with their elbows picked up a little bit. And I keep trying to get your elbows underneath your stomach and all of that. And I'm sure it was just some modification some teacher did for somebody, but it's like,
there's no way you're gonna get up
down here. So how do I get these people to get their arms underneath them?
You have to just get them to try the right way and tell them that it's okay, it's going to be uncomfortable.
Elbows are supposed to The one thing that I try with people who really don't want to is that the arms have got to be straight. And this is what Bikram does. They've got to be straight. No bend in the elbows. And you keep enforcing it. Today, they can stay outside if they must. So tomorrow, you've got to bring millimeter closer each day. And he says this. So there's once the elbows are bent, you're putting weight on the wrists, all kinds of nonsense going on. Yeah. So they've got to be straight. Just today, just give them a concession. They can be a little bit outside. Now, millimeter in, you know, that's what I do.
The other thing is that it's important for students to learn that you're not flopping onto your arms. You're not just dropping your entire body weight onto your elbows and your wrists. Your arms are not passively tucked underneath your body and just sort of suffering badly. You know, your arms are meant to be muscular. They're meant to be braced and strong, and it makes a world of difference to the health of your elbows and your wrist if you do that posture with your arms braced. So as Michele was saying, that instruction of grab the floor with your fingertips is a very important instruction to create that power, that strength in the arm. I mean, I had a problem with this right elbow where I hurt the elbow, I damaged or chipped it when I was a teenager. And so for the longest time, if I tried to straighten my elbow, it would be intensely painful. And the pain would linger for many minutes afterwards. It was horrible. And so I just wouldn't do that bit of the posture. I'd always have my right arm because it was really, really painful. And eventually I was at teacher training, and one of the people said, well, you're trained to be a teacher. You've got to actually do what we say. I'm like, okay, all right. So, you know, and for me, it was learning that I had to grab the floor with the fingertips. I literally had to put a lot of effort into tightening my arm and bracing my arm against the floor. And for a week, it was really, really painful. And then it's been much, much better since. I mean, probably 95% better than it was. So, you know, that's the hardest bit of the teaching. It's less about the technique than it is about encouraging a student to explore the right way.
And you know,
it's also interesting.
I know I'm not. Oops.
Sorry. So let me finish that one off. It's in what goes on what Matt said. It's just like it's important that we say all the instructions and encourage them to do all the instructions. Because I know as a practitioner, I've left out this or that, and once I put it in, it's game changing. So the teacher says all the instructions in the right order. The student does all the instructions in the right order, and then the progression happens. Sorry, Joanne, I'll shut up now.
I I was just going to add one thing, Angie. You know, some people may be hearing straight and thinking that outside of their body, because it's straight down, as opposed to what Matt is saying, which is the arm is straight, it's not bending, but it still comes in at an angle. I know I was struggling with that for a couple of weeks where I was like, well, my arms go in like this, and is that straight? Because it's on an angle. So helping them understand that it's about the elbow not bending as opposed to a straight line from your shoulder down may help.
That's a good point.
I would be careful with that. You know, first of all, I want to say, Angie, thank you for being here and bringing that up, because that's what starts to erode the very thing that Thomas and Lenora were talking about in the beginning of this conversation. And by them not doing this posture tells you and us that they need it. Mm-hmm. You know, especially now, right, where everybody's typing and texting a lot, right? I bet you their elbows hurt, their wrists hurt. And, you know, it's funny that you bring that up. And Matt and Sarah, was going to ask you, you know, right now, I'm really seeing that that's kind of one of the toughest postures right now, I feel, at our school. And maybe it is because your guys are at home and you're doing all this kind of work and this is hurting and they don't want to do it. So in my mind, Angie, I love that you're here, and I think you're obligated to say it the right way, because they'll connect at some point. And when they do, they're going to remember that you taught them the right way.
Yes.
Don't give in. Okay. That's for their health. I know it's hard to do, but keep your integrity about it and just say the dialogue the right way. And yeah, just like Sarah was saying, they're welcome to hold their arms out a little bit, and then tolerating a little bit of pain sensation more and more each day.
Bikram says, she said, just today you bring them outside. This is not lifetime career. You know, it's like today you bring them outside and get them straight. Then tomorrow 1 millimeter. Gives them a little bit to play with. They feel like you understand them, but there they try.
Joanne, you look like you were trying to say something.
Go ahead, Joanne.
Joanne?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that because you asked earlier about like how you guys were delivering things and if they made differences to us. And I remember at the old studio, I didn't understand this particular posture, why we needed to have our hands underneath us and grab the floor. Like I didn't understand, like I was doing this with my hands, but there was no follow through with the rest of my arms. So I was just like, what are we doing here? And it was when you, Matt, told me that we're not just trying to lift our legs like this, but the eventual posture is to like actually go like that. You did something like that with your hands where you showed me what the like eventual goal of the advanced postures. That made a world of difference to me. I was like, oh, that's what I'm going for. Like, I can't do that if I'm just like groping the ground. That's not gonna work. So it made me activate my arms. And I know you can't like do this in the class all the time, but just that was really helpful for me to know what the eventual goal is with the body. Yeah.
Yeah. The one class that I ever took with Bikram right before he left the country, he had a guy in that class who had been going to his studio for like probably at least 10 years. And this guy was in his 50s, and he had them demonstrate that posture. And he just looked like some ordinary guy, but his legs went, just like Joanne just mentioned, his legs just went up almost 90 degrees. And it was like, we were just like, wow. And by seeing that at the beginning, it gave you some confidence, that someday, we would get there, and that, that was what we were going for.
Yeah. It's something, going back to what Lenora was saying earlier, that what I'd invite you next time you practice this posture, aside from getting a secure grip of the floor with your arms, is start slowly, like you can extend from your big toe, and then your ankle, and then your knee, then your hip, and then one vertebra by vertebra. So rather than seeing the posture as a one-time lift your leg up, like that's a single action, think of it as a progressively lifting and extending and lifting and extending and lifting and extending and lifting and extending and lifting and extending, and see if you can trace the extension all the way up the spine, bit by bit. and just see where you get to. But you've got to start with a willingness to come up less, to come up less than you normally do. Because it's, it's one of the things about often this journey is about unlearning some of the cheats we did to look good, to find the underlying technique of really tapping into things. So play with that next time.
So let me add to that too. This is a big point, because the other part of that story, Neil, is when somebody can do that posture and lift their legs all the way up. I mean, I know it looks glorious, but Bikram will tell you in the first set to not do it, because it's harder to actually keep your legs halfway. Remember, this is spinal strengthening series. So if they're lifting the legs all the way up, they've got a little bit of momentum. And yes, it's hard to do, but they're not getting the benefit that we're getting by being in that struggle, right? To work the upper spine with the legs. So that's why he'll say, don't do it first set. You have the legs halfway, and then second set, you can do it if you want to, because they're getting the benefit in the first set. The second set with the momentum, it looks flashy, but they're not working the spinal strength. So that, that concept goes for every posture, you guys. That's why we talk about making sure you do the steps right. It's never an end result, right? Of, yes, I mean, it's awesome, right? To get your head on your knee and release your hands and all that. But the journey in getting there, think about what that's doing for your body and your mind.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No, I was just going to say, and, some of the times where I've actually been able to make it in the studio in the past, I've taken some classes with Sarah where she's always said, it's not a performance. So that was always like a good reminder, that we're just trying to do it correctly. I just had one thought just before we leave this, which is that in the half lotus, for me, this happens to me most of the time, which is that the first thing that we do in half lotus is lifting up the right leg. So straightening the leg, locking the knee, and then lifting it up. Most of the time I get a cramp when I do that, almost invariably. And it doesn't happen the second time, and it usually doesn't happen in my left leg, although sometimes it happens in my left leg. But it's almost like, I would say most of the time, at least 70% of the time, just that first one in my right leg. As soon as I kind of like try to lock my knee and lift up my leg, I get a cramp. And then, I can only go so far before it's just too painful, and I have to put my leg down. But I'm just wondering if there's any insight into why that might be happening.
Where is the cramp?
Which part of the leg?
In my calf.
Then you're using the calf muscle too much, quite likely.
Yeah, you should discover this in balancing stick. So, again, the leg, a locked knee is a straight leg is an extended leg. And so you should be thinking more about lengthening the leg. And as you lengthen the leg, the calf muscle shouldn't be involved. So if you cramp in balancing stick in the calf or in locust in the calf muscle, you're not actually locking your knee. You're actually lifting from the calf muscle. So forget about the calf muscle and push more through the heel. So you see how my elbow's bending? If I push through the heel of my palm, which is like the heel of the foot, if I push my hand away from me, my arm will inevitably straighten. And if I keep going when it's already straight, it will just become very, very strong. And the lifting of the arm is going to happen from up here with the biceps and the triceps. It's not going to happen from here. And so what's happening with people in locust is they lift here as opposed to lifting here. And so you can train yourself out of that by simply extending the leg. And extend the leg, it's impossible to lift from the calf. You have to lift from the thigh muscles. And that's a really important piece of locking the knee, whether you're upside down like balancing stick and locust, or you're up the right way with like standing head to knee.
This is also going to help you in the standing head to knee, boss, because it's very hard. My left calf, I want to use it too much The right calf
Yeah.
doesn't work, doesn't do it.
You know,
back.
for you,
It's-
Neil,
have
in
to- you have to do
particular,
it.
you know, because you struggle to lock your knee. You in many of the postures where
A
the knee,
lot.
yeah, and it's because you haven't quite made the mental connection yet to really extend the leg. If you can learn to really push the foot away from you, so your leg is not just straight but extended straight, which is what ultimately a locked knee is a leg that is in extension constantly. And so then it becomes like a lamppost and it cannot bend because all of the muscles are actively extending the leg, and there's no chance for it to bend. And that's very important because there's no chance for it to bend in any direction. So if you're prone to hyperextending, it's impossible to hyperextend if you lock your knee correctly. So, you know, to Angie's point about, you know, things she's noticed at other places, you know, some of these places say, oh, no, you should have a micro bend in your knee just so you don't hyperextend, completely missing the point. A locked knee cannot possibly bend because it is a leg in constant extension. And so you've got to learn that sensation. So sometimes it's really useful if you're doing it at home. If you've got something heavy like a bolster, but I mean like a really heavy bolster or something, you know, something really heavy, some planks of wood or something you can push your foot against and straighten your legs by pushing that weight away from you. So you're pushing through the heel and the ball of the foot. So you really get the resistance of the weight. So you're pushing against it. So you really get the sense of extending. You'll get it. You know, the light bulb will come on and you'll be like, oh my God, how did I not know this for my entire life?
Well, I wonder, can I just take off what you said, Neil? Thank you for the question and thank you for what you know, giving us opportunity. What Neil said is really what I think is listening to your body. You get some sensation when you practice, which is feedback what you're doing. And then if that doesn't seem quite right, then you think, well, what would I do to not do that? And this is listening to the body. Emmy, again, we'll talk about pain being the teacher, these sensations being the teacher. So what is it that I could do differently that then I wouldn't feel that? Using the body as the educator, listening to the body that way. Thank you, Neil.
It's been within the last week where my knees go back the other way. I'm a recovering hyperextender. And just in the on my weaker side, which is when my right leg is the standing leg, to really kick that heel forward. And Matt is right. If you find that point where it cannot bend in any direction. And then it was just like, oh my gosh, this is freedom. And then my elbows came down. I lost my balance before I could get my head to my knee, but who cares? I found it. And then once I found it, then you can find it again because you know what you're looking for feeling wise. And thank you. It's been so fun. It has been so fun, but it's been a long time coming. So don't give up on it. I mean,
yes,
it's a long time coming.
Nice.
And it is fun, isn't it? That exploration is actually fun. Once you let go of the fact it's got to be this, it's got to be that. I'm exploring how to do it so I get the benefits. It starts to become really fun, and freedom comes at the end. I mean, the end of the portion is no end. It's like it's not, you know. It's it is fun. The exploration. Think of it that way, not to getting it wrong, getting it right.
Yeah.
Chantal, you had a question a bit earlier.
Yeah, so about 3 months back, I actually saw a clip by, what's his name, from Canada?
Brad.
Sorry?
Brad?
No. But anyway, so I actually saw him kind of cupping and grabbing the floor while he was doing the full locust. He's the one who goes full 90 degree, right? And he does Tula Dandasan wherever he goes.
It's Changu. Yeah, okay.
Changu, right. Changu Change, right. And that's when I realized what I was doing wrong. I was never grabbing the floor. And that's when everything started improving me in that posture. And I had tennis elbow on my left arm, much better ever since. But I still have a problem with my right wrist. And it kind of gets worse when I do the locust pose, especially when both the legs are up. So then after the half locust pose, for doing the full locust pose, it's really hard for me to keep my wrist straight. I have to, it really hurts a lot on my wrist. So I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong there.
Yeah, we would have to probably see you up close to see your wrist and see if there's some sort of twist or bend in the wrist.
Yeah, so my wrist doesn't fully contact with the ground when I'm doing the half locust pose. It's kind of a little bit twisted. Only this portion touches the ground, and this portion I have to keep on pressing, but then that creates kind of a torque on my wrist.
Yeah, and it probably originates in the shoulders. Most of us have an unevenness, like you see it in Cobra, where we say palms, weight evenly distributed over the palms, and so those 4 points of the palm, most of us don't necessarily evenly press through all 4 points. And all I can say to you really is that keep exploring, trying to find the evenness of it. And again, extension of the arms is one of the techniques that you can use to start to gain access to.
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
You're just a little bit, Matt and Sarah. There's just a little bit. Oh, we lost you. There you are. Okay. Nope. Maybe, sort of, kind of. Shantanu, it would be good to see that. The one thing that I feel like I'm hearing from you is maybe watch it where you so much want the benefit out of the posture that maybe you're pushing a little bit too much pressure on the wrist and not using the arm itself.
Yes.
Without knowing it, you could be even sort of bending your elbow, and now your wrist has got even more pressure, right? So you really have to make sure from the very beginning, arms straight, roll your arms underneath your body, right? Keep the elbows, right? Baby fingers touching, grab the floor, make sure that your elbows are straight, and play with it a little bit. Feel the weight going forward, and your arms are that, just like Matt and Sarah were saying, right? That's your base, right? You want to make sure, is that base solid, just like you would your legs, right? So I think, it is helping your wrist, but you don't want to, if your wrist can't come all the way flat, don't try to change the wrist a little bit, right? And because actually you could be doing more of this thing to it, right? That's not good either, right? And I actually see you guys in class. I know those of you that take my class, and Ash, you're reminding me of this. You guys watch your hands too in awkward posture and in standing bow. Like even today I was correcting Shirley. Sometimes even you guys in half moon, your wrists get a little bit funny, right? Watch your wrists. Your wrist should be straight. You want your wrists straight, 5 fingers together. Standing bows, sometimes people, your wrists are kind of, your wrists are straight. Remember, every posture is preparing for the next. So by the time you're on the floor, right, you're gaining that flexibility in your arms, right? But just make sure that you're not doing funny things with your wrists, right? Even in floor, in the airplane pose, right? You see people's wrists are funny. I'm constantly thinking of my fingertips. I mean, I know my mind knows that my arm is a runway right down, and I have energy coming out through my middle finger. Right.
There's what I was going to say, Shantanu, the same what Michelle's saying, that is he there? There he is. He's moved. It's not that you're making the wrist do the stretching. The wrist, like Michelle says, is the end point of the whole arm doing the stretching. So you're stretching through the arm, through the wrist, to the fingertips. So that would be the same in the locust.
Yeah.
But more particularly when you go onto the full locust, make the arm stretch and it comes out through the wrist.
Remember, awkward's preparing you for that too, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask something about palms touching? Because Matt was just talking about the 4 corners of the palms and that those are touching. And I have to tell you, I've been trying to get this little part of my hand to touch. So I've been struggling. I've been like, what am I doing wrong? So it's just the 4 corners of the palm, right?
Yes, and your palm will, you know, your palms may come closer together, but that's not the goal. The goal is for the kind of structural points of the palm to be firmly together. You know, the amount that somebody's palm is cupped versus really protruding, that varies on just the anatomy of somebody's hands. Different people have them. Over time, as you learn to widen the palm out, it will probably become flatter here, but it's not really the objective. It's more that if you don't have the 4 points connected, then you're already distorting your hand.
Yeah.
And it's not just your hand you're distorting just because of the previous conversation. That means that your shoulders are engaged differently. Because you can try this as an experiment. If you straighten your arm out in front of you and you put your palm flat down onto a table with your arms extended out, and you push down through the inside and the outside of your hand, you should feel it differently on the inner and the outer regions of your shoulder. And the same with the front of the palm and the back of the palm. Each piece of that connects to a slightly different area of the shoulder sensitivity. And so by working on your palms, you're also working on your shoulders at the same time.
I commend your diligence, Lenora, but that would fall into the category of what Bikram calls too good is no good. It's like,
it's like I'm overthinking it. I'm just
I have a question.
Shoot, Jeff.
On fixed firm, probably one of the strangest ones, I think. What is the end game? I'm guessing the kind of the order of the priority. You know, knees together, knees on the floor, buttocks on the floor, shoulders, crossed arms on the floor.
So eventually, eventually your end game is that your butt is on the floor, the heels are touching the sides of your hips, your knees are together, you're lying all the way down with the spine extended, and you've lifted your abdomen and your ribcage up. So, you know, everything, does that make sense?
Yes, so, absolutely. But is there an order that you want to tackle one before the other, or is that not so relevant?
That's a precise order that it goes in the dialogue.
Yeah.
So first of all, you get therapy to the knees in the right place, the hips in the right place. This is why you make a little bit fuss. Knees together, feet together, then just separate the feet. So then the hips ideally should be on the floor. The hips on the floor, and then one elbow at a time. Then the upper back on the floor. At this point, you're getting a nice benefit to the quadriceps muscles, the hips and the knees. Then you bring the arms, pull the elbows down, the shoulders benefiting. Then, keeping all of that there, lift the chest and stomach up as much as you can, keeping all of that there. We're not trying to do great big Urdhva Dhanurasana wheel. We're just trying to do little tension that you might feel. I might not even see it. Still the shoulders relaxed. And now you're stretching the internal organs. So, and it's, in some lineages, it's a long posture, 15 minutes they stay in it until the knees really. So the first thing that happens with that posture is that the cartilage gets the cartilage in the knees doesn't have much blood supply. So that pumping action, which we do slowly, we take it out and then we straighten the legs and pump it back in. That's the primary benefit. And you really take it out while if you're in the right position. And then you straighten the legs after, you pump it back in really strong. So it gets a good blood supply. And then the same principle is going down the rest of the body, the abdominal organs, the spleen. So yes, exactly the order to get the benefits.
So the knees stay down, butt stays down, and then work on shoulders.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. And working, you know, ultimately also then bringing the knees together. So
yes, of course, yes.
Yeah. So in some styles of yoga, it's sometimes taught where the knees have to stay together, and it might take you a very long time before you eventually get down to the floor. The way Bikram teaches it, which is more influenced by therapeutic style of teaching, allow the knees to open to begin with if they need to allow you to go down, and then sort of tidy it up once you're all the way down. But it's very important at the early stage of this that the heels have to touch the hips. You don't ever want to let the heels come away from the hips, because that you're starting to twist the knees, whether you realize it or not.
Oh, speaking of that, I'm sure this doesn't apply to anybody here, but I've seen it with newer students, when I say heels touching the hips throughout posture, they then sit on their heels. This is the inside, like I think you all know this, but their hips inside the heels, like you could just slide a bit of paper in between.
Snug.
I'm curious, Jeff, why you're asking. What's going on?
Well, for the longest time, I've been focusing on keeping my knees on the ground and together. And I was not, I don't even know if my butt was reaching the floor, and then certainly not my shoulders. So I started messing around and doing different orders with that, and letting the knees separate and letting them come up and getting the butt and the shoulders down. And that felt like it was more complete. So that's why I wanted to find out what order is best. I know they're all eventually down, right?
Well, if you were in Bikram's class, and I know Matt and Sarah would agree with this, he would see you, and I know he would say, he would just stop. He would have everybody still in the posture, and he would say, open your knees, boss.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or
open the knees and let them come up, or just open?
No. Keep them down. Just open them up.
Open them up. That's what I was going to say, Jeff. Open the knees is a perfect thing, because even sometimes I open mine to get my hips even snugger on the ground. Honestly, I play about with it. If the knees come up, there's not going to be a disaster. You're not going to hurt yourself. What it does mean is you start losing all the benefits. So keep that. Open the knees as much as you need to. Keep them down. What Michele said. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think that because you don't want to be stuck, Jeff. So
yeah, I agree.
Oh, I love being stuck.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
But I feel like you're saying you've been stuck long enough. So good for you for exploring. And I would do that. And honestly, too, if your hips don't touch the floor, I don't think Bikram would stop you. That is not. Ideally your hips are on the floor. You just have to make sure your heels and your hips touch. There's no gap ever, not even go back. Open the knees and then go down one elbow at a time. Now, think about this, right? When you're on your elbows, there's more weight evenly distributed. So Bikram, when he teaches it, if he gets you to go there, he knows that there's a part of you that's going to be, right? There's less pressure on the knee. So I haven't seen you practice in a while, although I watch you when you do your practice, you don't do this posture as much, right? You've stopped yourself to sort of just sit there. And I like that you want to explore it, right? Get more out of it. Open your knees.
Sure.
You can't go back. Right elbow, left elbow, right? This is a very hard posture in my estimation to really do the right way. Tuck your chin in, back of the neck on the floor, no gap. Oh my God, that's hard to do, right? Pull your elbows down towards the floor. That's hard to do. So take your time.
It's easier if your knees are lifting.
Open a little bit more instead. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Michele, actually, it was one of your what was that, Tuesday tips videos on this particular one that helped me a lot.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're watching those. Thank you. That's great. Those were, you guys, it's on our YouTube channel. Right? And what do we call them, Matt and Sarah? They were tips, right? Our
Tuesday tips.
Yeah, Tuesday tips. Yeah.
Yes.
We have to bring those back again. We haven't done those in a long time. So
Thursday tips instead.
I tell you, Michele, the videos that I saw, those were the most helpful, more than the instruction. Instructions help, but then it takes time to interpret and figure out what exactly it means. The video just make it click.
That's great. You're a visual guy then.
Yes.
Good for you. That's great. You guys, it's worth it if you're ever, inclined to go on our YouTube channel. It is very good. I have to say, no, I'm biased, but there's a lot of wealth of information on there that we've taken a lot of time, right, to make sure is on there for you guys. And one of them is the Tuesday, right? So.
Yeah. I have a related question to this fixed form, right? There's a problem in my right knee. I think there's a small meniscus tear, right? And it's going on for years. I just don't want to do any surgery or anything yet, right? But I've noticed when I do this, it helps me a lot. To your point, Sarah, I think the blood really flows there and it helps the cartilage. But I've also noticed in this my current 60-day challenge, I was not able to do the third part of awkward at all. But in one practice, I just decided to do it and see what happens, right? Is it related to the injury or not? Now I can go down well, no issue there, but I still can't get up. So is that something that I need to be careful about?
Well, you know, I think at one time, something Bikram says that I really understood, because I did, I don't know what it was, and it went away. I hurt my knee at one point, and what I found, I actually learned to do the third part of awkward better because I was obliged to squeeze my knees like my life depended on it to do it. That took the pain away because it made the strength, you know, and it's like I really felt it had a role in healing it. So getting up is harder, to be honest. Going down is one thing, getting up is another, right? So everybody knows that. But I think that when he'll say to you, we say bring the knees together, and he'll say squeeze your knees. Well, at that time I squeezed them because otherwise it hurt and nothing was happening. And then I was like, oh my God, I've got better at this posture. So I think that might help you to really squeeze them. Concentrate on squeezing them as you go down and up, and hopefully that will help.
There's also, I mean, in third part of awkward, particularly if you have a knee issue like a meniscus issue, it's you know, one of the common, to backtrack a little bit, one of the common causes of a meniscus injury, there are many, but one of the common ones is walking downhill. Like if you've been hiking, you hike downhill, that's the most vulnerable moment for your knee. And it's because the weight's not evenly distributed in the joint, and it surges forward, and the joint doesn't really like it very much. And so when you're doing these postures, and particularly third part awkward, all of that discomfort that you experience is information to you in real time. How are you using your knees? So you know, just like we were talking earlier with Neil about him using his calf muscle to lift his leg, it's the same when you're in third part of awkward. Do you come up pushing down forward into your knee? Do you come up by lifting your chest up? In which case your knees should feel lighter as you're coming up. And so are you heavy as a sack of potatoes trying to come up? In which case that's going to be really difficult on your knees. Or you chest up, stretching up, coming up, spine straight, in which case your knees will feel light, like they're just catching up with the rest of your body. So if you kind of forget the physics of this about, you know, how does the body lift itself up, there is that sense in which if you lift up through the spine, chest up, lifting up, you will feel very light in the knees. But if you feel like you're pushing yourself up from your lower legs, you're going to put a lot of pressure in the knees. And so, you know, just explore that and start to feel the difference in how you stand up and how you sit down in that posture. And it'll start to become more vivid to you that there are different ways to sit down and come back up. It's the same thing in triangle. When we say, and in the dialogue, the word bend the knee is in bold. You know, when we say inhale, breathing, you know, bend the knee and sit down. So it's not push down into the knee, it's simply bend the knee and sit down. And it sounds like a small detail, but you start to see that there is a difference, and the stresses on the knee are quite different. And so it's something you really have to just explore for yourself and feel it. And once you feel it, you'll never be worried about it again, because you'll feel a healthy way to move the knee versus a less healthy way to move the knee. And right now that your meniscus is bothering you is excellent, because it gives you extra sensitivity. It's like your electron microscope can do a real-time MRI of your knee as you're doing the posture, which is kind of a blessing.
Which is some of the practice. I love that. That's the diagnostic, right? That what comes back to you is the diagnostic. And I will say that I find it very hard to come up. And I did get some wonderful feedback from a senior teacher in New York. I fell out of the posture coming up, and she said, "Oh, that was good because you were doing it the right way and your body's not used to it yet." That was really good. So if it doesn't always work perfectly, still keep trying, because you keep learning and eventually it comes.
There's one other place that you can pay attention to, particularly because you mentioned about meniscus, which is in bow pose, Dhanurasana. You know, when you're on the floor and you grab your feet from the outside. If you excessively, and we see it sometimes with very strong beginners, if you excessively kick back, not kicking up, that's the same thing like running down a hill. It puts a lot of pressure in the wrong place on the knee. And so if you feel tension there in the knee like that when you're doing the posture, it's almost certainly that you're simply not kicking up enough. You know, that you're not using your thigh muscles enough to lift the thigh, to kick the foot up into the air. There is kicking back in that posture. It creates the tension of the posture, but the deeper action is the kicking up. And again, you'll feel a night and day difference in the knee if your knee is sensitized due to injury.
Yeah, a good one.
I'm curious.
Related.
I'm curious, Ash. You said that you went for it and did third part, right? With yeah, and then you said that you had a hard time coming up. Was that different than any other time you've done it before?
I don't even remember when I did it last time. I've been avoiding it for many years now.
Oh,
because
wow.
of this, right? Wow. And when I did it in this 60-day challenge, it was a surprise for myself that I could go down. Now I just have to learn coming back up to some of the options that Matt was talking about.
Wow. Well, welcome to the company here. And everyone.
I love that though. That is the decision, isn't it? To go for it. You have to, there has to be that mental determination to do it and to see what happens. I commend you.
Ash, this is funny because I'm sure Matt and Sarah and I have taught you many times. What have you been doing? Because I don't remember. What have you been doing? What have you been doing?
In that third part?
Yeah, third part. What have you been doing?
I just try it a little bit and then stand up and just stay there.
Yes.
I have a related question. I also have difficulty coming back up, and I've been trying to use my inner thighs a lot, squeeze my knees together to get back up, but I always end up leaning forward, which I feel like is not what we're supposed to do, but I can't seem to get up otherwise.
So Joanne, think chest up. So again, like, imagine I'm sitting in the chair, I'm hunched forward. What do I do? So you lift the chest up, and you'll find it's very hard to describe because it counters one's understanding of the physics, but you find if you lift your chest, suddenly you feel lighter in that posture. It's because the effort's distributed across a bigger range of the body, but essentially you feel lighter as you come back up rather than it all just bearing down in your legs.
Okay.
Can you do toe stand, Joanne?
I used to be able to. It's a bit wobbly now.
Because that has the same thing, right?
Okay.
You want to come up off the heel. So Ash, you would do that too. I just want to finish with Ash. Ash, if it's not hurting you a lot, remember this is all about healing the knees. I would go for it and just interview it, right? Pay attention, go down really slow. And I'm just saying the same thing as Matt and Sarah. For me, when we stretch the spine up, and we say that over and over again in the second and third part, like imagine someone's pulling your hair up towards the ceiling. So you have to create that resistance. You have to constantly think that you're stretching up, stomach in, and you're stretching up, right? Coming up off your heel a half an inch. Knees down and forward, and then slowly just keep trying over and over again. Use the inner thighs, use the very top of the inner thighs, right? The stomach sucked in, right? Nice and tight, and then push the floor away. I'm thinking my spine, I actually say it to myself. I know that somebody's pulling my hair up towards the ceiling, and that image actually helps me. I push with my feet, with my inner thighs up off the floor. I didn't used to be able to do it, and now I can do it more often. Right? It's a lot with the mind too. Your arms have to be straight forward, stretching towards the mirror, right? There's geometry. Spine is stretching up, and you got to build the strength to come up. Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to add to this, Michele and Matt, if you don't mind. What Matt was explaining about feeling lighter, right? Not heavier when you have your chest up. To me, the way I could describe that feeling is, it is a very subtle movement you have to make, because if you go too far back with that, then you will fall on your butt, right? But then once you have your chest up, chin up, and as Michele is saying, you are being pulled by your hair up, what that does is actually kind of forces your legs to rise up, because your body is trying not to lose the balance. But then it's a very fine balance, and you really have to meditate at that point to make sure you're not going to fall back, but you're also not going to go in front and putting a weight on your knee. And I've been experiencing that for quite a while, actually.
Yeah, I did. Sorry, I was just going to say one thing. I one time in class, because I was trying to demonstrate this point in class, so I did third part of awkward. I went down and I held my own hair and pulled my own hair up to try and demonstrate, and it was incredible. It really was incredible. Even though I was putting, the physics of this would seem to not make sense, but it literally, like, I got lighter and lighter as I pulled myself up by my own hair. So if you ever get a little, perhaps before or after class, you want to play a little game with yourself, try it and see if you can get that sensation of what it feels like to pull your hair up. It's quite something.
As teachers, it's interesting to watch the class. We can tell when you get tired. Because all of a sudden you will not, it's not that your arms sag, you lean back or go forward a little bit, even a little bit. That's why you got to constantly go back to the spine stretching straight up, right? You get tired and you kind of crouch a little bit, right? Or you just, your body's trying to find an area, right, to compensate for maybe something, you don't know it, right? You're leaning forward or leaning back, but it's up, right? It's up, straight up.
So Joanne, and it also relates to what you just said, Michele, that Tom was talking in the very beginning about learning to suck his stomach in. So there's an instruction in the first part of awkward, which was lost on me for a long time, which is suck your stomach in, suck it in, tightening up, suck it in, tightening up, hold it in. So it's not only back, it's back and up, and this engages all of those parts Michele was talking about. Now, if you think of that in all three parts, and the toe stand, it's difficult, but it's learning. You've got it, and you have to learn to use it. So suck it in, tightening up, and that whole area around the inner thighs, the pelvis, the stomach, and even we'll bring the chest up. What Matt was saying, help you bring the chest up.
I know it's a really hard posture.
It's a really hard posture. It's kind of fun though. I used to loathe it.
Yeah.
I used to hate it. And I now like exploring it.
I love when it's over. It was so great. Yeah, I know. Now I don't mind it. I don't know what teacher said this, and I'm not trying to put something that needs to be there. But in the second part, I think, we tend to lean forward a little bit. I think we can be weak in the upper part of our thighs. So I think of that when I'm doing second part of awkward. When I come down high on top of my toes, I really talk to my quads, my upper thighs, like stomach in and my upper thighs. I think even when I lower down, I say to myself that my knees are going up, right? My spine is going up and I'm lowering myself down, because we tend to sit in the chair, right? But our spine is forward, right? You want your so you've got it. It's asking you to really use all of your leg, right?
Yes, I think, Michele, we need to upgrade the studio. We need little devices that come down from the roof and they grab your hair, and then you have to do the posture with this traction spring against your hair to really get that sense that you're lengthening. And that would be quite a sight,
Oh my God, Matt, if there was one out there, I know you'd get us for us, right?
I'm sure we could engineer a solution if we're willing to invest in it,
So I also want to pick up something Joanne said that about, you said, you're not supposed to come forward. And we will say that, don't come forwards, keep the spine straight, all of this. Now, the dialogue will tell you what to do, how to do it, and it also implies in it, we'll tell you what not to do a lot of the time as well. That doesn't mean that you're the only person doing it and it's not hard work. It doesn't mean that the goal is to keep working towards how to use the body to get to the point where you don't come forward. Not that you did something bad or wrong because you came forward, because the rest of the class doing it as well, even a little bit, or those that aren't are working themselves not to. So it's going to happen. Yeah. It's describing the reality and what to do to counterbalance it as well, And
it's a beautiful scene to see everybody, right, Matt and Sarah, right, to see you all with such determination trying.
Absolutely. Yes.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Right? That's the point.
So I had another question about the standing separate leg stretching. So when I do this standing separate leg stretching, I think most of the time, I think I'm probably okay going down, but then if I try to grab my feet, my knees will bend a little. So I have two choices at that point. Well, maybe I'll find out about a third choice in a minute. But right now, my two choices are I can grab my ankles, which is what I normally do. And that way, at least I can straighten my legs and, focus on, having my weight go forward a bit. And try to get my chin in the right position. So that's what I usually do. The other thing is to put my hands on the floor. So I have two questions actually. One is grabbing my ankles okay, or should I, stop doing that? Because if I try to grab the sides of my feet, then my knees bend. And it's hard for me to keep my hands on the sides of my feet with my legs straight and my knees locked. So that's a problem. And then the other alternative is putting my hands on the floor. But if I put my hands on the floor, I'm not sure like exactly what I should be doing. Like, should they be like this? Should they be like this?
Yeah. So,
should they be coming back?
So Neil, 100% of the time that I do that posture, I bend the knees a little bit to grab my heels. And then I immediately straighten my legs, contract my thigh muscles, lift my kneecaps up, stretch my hips up and lock my knees so they're solid. I mean, so if the knees bend a little bit whilst you're grabbing the heels, it does not matter. You just immediately straighten the legs and lock the knees and keep them locked throughout the posture from that point forward. That's okay. That's just getting into the posture. There's no problem with that. But once you've got the grip on the heels, then absolutely lock the knees rock solid.
Putting their hands on the floor is a technique to really, its purpose is for someone who can't lock their knees at all. They literally can't do it. So when they put their hands on the floor, and it's a last resort, is to lock the knees, to learn it. And once they've got them, then they try to grab.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I feel embarrassed if I have to put my hands on the floor.
Right, I'll go. I do it now. I do it to suck my stomach in, and then I grab my heels. I kind of like it. It's like all these things that go around cycles. Do not be embarrassed. If you can't lock the knees, use it as a technique. And once you've got the knees up, then grab the heels.
And let's go back to what you don't want. You do not want to pull on bent knees. That's like, if we know one thing for sure, so don't worry about being embarrassed. The hands on the floor, if your hamstrings are super tight, bring your hands on the floor in front of you. And in Bikram's blue book, he will tell you from there, start to bend your elbows, right? All in the name of getting the stretch in the hamstring enough to walk the hands where you grab the sides of the feet. No bent knees.
Because so there's two challenges. So the first is, if I try to, following what Matt just said, if I try to grab this, bend my knees a little bit, grab the sides of my feet, I'm not actually sure that my legs are locked at that point, because if I kind of like look sideways on each side, I think that they might be, but there's other postures where I think that my knees are locked and they're not locked either. So I'm a little bit uncomfortable that I'm actually really locking my knees there when I think I'm locking my knees. So that's challenge number one. And then challenge number two is for putting my hands on the floor and then putting my elbows down. So I remember, Michele, that I was taking, I think maybe it was a live stream and you were demonstrating that. And I tried doing that, but I can't actually, when I put my hands on the floor, it's difficult at this point for me to actually get my elbows down. So I've tried to actually do that, but
can I go back? let's go back, because it sounds like you can grab the sides of your feet.
With
You're
bent
like-
knees, yeah.
Yeah, and then you just have to work on locking your legs.
Yeah.
You
And
have-
your legs are not locked.
Hang on one second. You have to build that mind-body connection. Now, I think it's a beautiful point that you're in. How do you know? You're right, because think of how many postures we're asking you to lock the leg, right? To lock the knee. So if you're like not sure, this is where you're at in your practice, right? What does it feel like for you to feel the contraction of your thigh muscle, to suck your stomach in, to know what a locked out leg is? So yeah, keep grabbing, and yeah, you've got to find that for yourself. You have to know that you have a locked out leg. I definitely know now. Maybe there was a time I didn't know, but I know my kneecaps lifted, my thighs contracted, my stomach is in, my leg is like lamppost, right? And I can use my legs as leverage, my grip as leverage. I've got my strength now, and I can pull my spine down.
And you remember, Neil, I started answering the question about this posture because I thought you were asking about this. So it's in the same family as those others we were talking about, the Padahastasana and the Paschimottanasana. So same principle. I would say, having watched you, take longer to come down. There's a point when you get halfway down and then you rush and then you lose it. Take as long as you need to. We do actually have to go and teach in the studio, and he's going to practice. So
wow. 7, amazing, you guys. I'm so proud of you guys. You got great questions. It's
wonderful
awesome.
questions.
Thank you.
What a pleasure to spend time with you all.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
it is.
And this is another chance, for me to also say thanks. So I'm, I appreciate, that we've continued the early classes. I appreciate the 6 a.m. So if you check your records, I've actually attended every single 6 a.m. on the weekends this whole year.
Wow.
So I'm definitely taking advantage of that. So I appreciate that. And then the classes, that I've attended during the week, I appreciate the feedback. Even if it's like almost the same thing every week, I still appreciate it. So.
It is for all of us, always the same feedback. It's all right. Do not worry.
You can't hear the stuff too many times, right? It's got to really sink in and metabolize.
Yes.
But we plan on having these like maybe once a quarter. So we'll see you guys again, right? So keep those questions, write them down, save them.
That was a pleasure. Thank you so much for giving us opportunity to talk about the yoga with you.
Thank you guys. Thank you. This is great. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
We'll see you later, Michele.
Yeah, thanks, you guys. Always a pleasure to talk with you guys. Love it. Bye.
I learned more than training. Thank you.